So imagine you just finished, like, an exhausting 8-hour shift.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right. Your feet ache, your brain is totally fried, and literally the only thing you want to do is collapse on the couch.
Absolutely.
But instead of driving home to rest, you sit in the company parking lot, you log into an app on your phone, and you instantly become someone else's chauffeur.
Or, maybe a freelance graphic designer for another 4 hours.
Exactly. And you aren't doing this to buy a yacht, you're doing it to afford groceries, or maybe just to keep up with the electricity bill.
Yeah, it's just basic survival at this point.
Because today, taking on a second job isn't always like a stepping stone to wealth. For millions of people, it has become this bizarre kind of financial treadmill,
It really is. I mean, it is the defining economic dilemma of this decade.
which is crazy to think about.
It is. People are pouring just unprecedented amounts of their free time into secondary employment, yet so many feel like they're barely treading water financially.
So we're seeing this massive collision between what we generally call hustle culture and the actual raw mechanics of the tax system.
Right.
And that's what we are going to tear apart today in this deep dive. We really want to figure out, is the gig economy actually empowering you to move up in the world, or
Or is it a trap, basically?
exactly, or is it this perfectly designed system that keeps you in the exact same social class while generating a massive new stream of tax revenue for the government?
That is the core question.
Because, I mean, if you are just working overtime to hand that cash straight to the tax office, we really have to ask why anyone is even doing this.
Yeah, to answer that, we have to look past the motivational podcasts and dig into the raw data.
Which we have a lot of today.
We do. We're pulling from global economic research on gig platforms, historical data on tax brackets, and even diving into the psychological philosophy of, why we work in the first place.
I actually want to start with that psychology because I was reading this AP News report on a trend they call polyworking.
Polyworking.
Right. Which, honestly, is just a very polite way of saying people are working themselves to the bone to combat frozen salaries and inflation.
Yeah, it's a very fancy rebrand of having two jobs.
Right. So they profiled this 29-year-old woman, Caitlin Cusick. Her primary full-time job is as a visual merchandiser for Patagonia.
Okay, sounds like a solid job.
It is. But after she clocks out of her day job, she manages social media for a German shoe brand for like 10 to 15 hours a week.
Oh, wow.
On top of that, she runs an Etsy shop selling her paintings. And if that wasn't enough,
Wait, there's more.
yes, she also works as an usher at concerts in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Just reading her schedule out loud is
Yeah.
exhausting.
I need a nap just thinking about it, honestly. But when the reporter asks her why she does this, she obviously brings up the high cost of living and student loans, but then she adds something kind of strange.
What did she say?
She says, quote, I wanted to switch it up. I don't want to just do the same thing every day. Yeah, she frames it as this choice for variety, and that's not isolated to her. I looked at this recent survey of Gen Z gig workers, and nearly half of them, about 47%, claim their primary motivation for gig work is passion.
Passion.
Not survival, passion.
See, that framing is so crucial to understand. If we look at the work of Theodor Adorno, he's a philosopher from the Frankfurt School, he actually mapped out this exact psychological phenomena decades ago.
Really? Decades ago?
Yeah. He argued that modern capitalism relies on something he called the illusion of freedom.
Okay, but wait. My grandfather worked a second job driving a cab on weekends back in the 70s to pay for my dad's college.
Sure.
People have always moonlighted. What makes this polyworking trend so different that we need philosophers to weigh in?
Well, the difference is the internal narrative. Your grandfather likely viewed driving that cab as a necessary sacrifice,
I
right?
definitely didn't do it for fun.
Exactly. He didn't rebrand it as a side hustle that defined his personal brand. Adorno pointed out that if an economic system simply forced you to work 4 jobs under threat of starvation, you would eventually rebel.
Because it feels obviously oppressive.
Right. It's blatant exploitation.
Yeah.
So a truly sophisticated economic system relies on what he termed instrumental rationality,
Instrumental rationality, meaning what exactly?
meaning we basically internalize the market's demand for relentless productivity, and we package it to ourselves as our own autonomy.
Oh, wow. So we essentially brainwash ourselves into thinking working all the time is a hobby.
We convince ourselves that monetizing every waking moment is like the ultimate form of self-optimization. I mean, think about modern social media influencers or those hustle bros online.
Oh, yeah, the rise and grind guide. Yeah.
Exactly. They preach that if you aren't turning your fitness routine into a sponsored post or your knitting hobby into an Etsy empire, you're literally leaving money on the table.
So you start to feel guilty for just, watching a movie on a Tuesday night.
Yes. The system ensures your total compliance, not by holding a gun to your head, but by making you believe that turning your free time into a late-night grind was entirely your own brilliant idea.
So the hamster wheel basically gets painted gold.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
You feel like a boss running your own micro-empire, but you're still just powering the machinery. But, I mean, if you are putting in all those extra hours and commodifying every ounce of your free time, your bank account should theoretically reflect that boss status.
You would think so.
But there is a mechanical catch to this, isn't there? Because the math of a second job isn't just, more work equals more money.
Far from it. The data we pulled from H&R Block regarding multiple income sources reveals a massive mechanical flaw for the average worker.
Okay.
They refer to it as the unintentional tax trap.
Let's use the Australian tax system as our model here, since we have their structural data for this deep dive. How does this trap actually trigger?
So when you secure your primary job, that employer claims the tax-free threshold on your behalf. Structurally, the first $18,200 you earn in a year isn't taxed at all. It is recognized as your base survival income.
Which makes perfect sense. The government acknowledges you need a baseline just to eat and keep the lights on before they start taking a cut.
Right. But the moment you take on a second job like logging into that rideshare app or taking on freelance graphic design, that secondary payer does not apply the threshold.
Uh-oh.
Your second job, and literally any gig work you stack on top of it, is taxed from the very first dollar at a higher progressive rate.
Okay, so it's like having two tabs open at two different bars on the same night.
That's a great way to look at it.
Neither bartender knows how much you've been drinking at the other place, so neither cuts you off. You think you're pacing yourself.
Right.
But at the end of the night, the bouncer adds both tabs together, sees you went way over the limit, and hits you with a massive premium surcharge.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Yeah.
During the financial year, your two income streams are operating completely in the dark regarding one another.
Right, the rideshare app has no idea what Patagonia is paying you.
Exactly. They withhold tax based only on what they see. And this frequently results in you being significantly undertaxed on your combined earnings throughout the year.
So you think your side hustle is incredibly lucrative week to week?
Until the end of the financial year. The tax office takes both of those tabs, combines them, realizes you've jumped into a completely different earning category, and slaps you with a massive unexpected tax bill.
Wow. So the side hustle cash you thought was going toward your student loans suddenly has to be handed straight over to the government to cover the shortfall.
Yep.
And it gets worse than just income tax, doesn't it? I saw something in our sources about a Medicare levy surcharge. How does taking on gig work accidentally trigger healthcare penalties?
Yeah, this is a huge trap. The Medicare levy surcharge is designed by the government to incentivize high earners to take out private health insurance.
Okay, to relieve pressure on the public hospital system.
Right. If you earn over a certain threshold for a single person in the 2026 tax year, that threshold is $101,000, and you don't have private hospital cover, the government penalizes you with an additional surcharge.
Okay, let me make sure I'm following this. Let's say I make $90,000 at my main job. I'm under the threshold, no penalty,
Correct.
but I decide to drive for Uber on the weekends because, I don't know, groceries are expensive. And I make an extra $12,000 driving. I push my combined income to $102,000.
You've now crossed the $101,000 threshold.
So because I took on a side hustle just to afford eggs, I now get hit with a healthcare penalty on my entire taxable income.
Yes.
That is insane.
You take on all the physical exhaustion and financial risk of the second job, you give up your weekends, and the act of trying to get ahead actively complicates your main income's tax profile.
It's triggering penalties that swallow the exact margins you were trying to create in the first place. Hang on, I need to play devil's advocate here for a second because this brings up a fear I hear constantly from people.
Sure.
I have friends who swear up and down that they actively refused a promotion or they stopped doing overtime because it would push them into a higher tax bracket and they would actually take home less money than before.
Oh, I've heard that so many times.
Is that what's happening here? Because if moving into a new bracket actually shrinks your paycheck, the entire concept of earning more is mathematically broken.
Okay, so that is perhaps the most pervasive and honestly destructive financial myth in modern society.
Really?
It's a
Okay.
total myth. And the analysts at Tax Window break this down mathematically to prove how false it is. We operate on a progressive tax system.
Right.
That means you only ever pay the higher tax rate on the extra income that falls into that specific bracket, not your total income.
Okay, let's run some numbers on this to show exactly how that works.
Sure, let's assume your side hustle, or maybe a promotion, bumps your total income from $120,000 up to $121,000 a year.
Okay.
In Australia, crossing that $120,000 line pushes you into the 37% tax bracket.
Right. And the myth says your entire $121,000 is now taxed at 37%.
Which would be catastrophic. You'd lose thousands of dollars instantly.
But that is not how it works.
No, not at all. That 37% rate only applies to the extra $1,000 that cross the line.
Oh, I see.
The first $120,000 is still taxed at the exact same lower progressive rates as it was before. So on that new $1,000 you earned, you pay $370 in tax to the government, and you keep the remaining $630.
Wow.
You are mathematically never worse off for earning more money.
Okay, that is a huge relief. The tax brackets themselves aren't actively punishing you for taking a step up.
No, they aren't.
But the sources point out that while a genuine promotion isn't bad, there is this silent mechanism working in the background that does steal your wealth without you even realizing it.
Yes. Now we need to talk about bracket creep.
Yeah, property and finance expert Michael Yardney wrote a brilliant analysis on this in our sources, and honestly, the mechanics of it are brutal.
They really are.
Walk us through how bracket creep quietly drains the middle class.
So bracket creep is a byproduct of inflation. Let's say inflation is running at 5%. To keep you happy, your employer gives you a 5% nominal wage increase.
Nice.
Right, on paper, your paycheck is larger. But in reality, you aren't a single cent wealthier. Your purchasing power hasn't changed at all.
Because a carton of milk costs 5% more, my paycheck is 5% bigger. I can still only afford the exact same carton of milk.
Exactly. My standard of living is completely stagnant.
Right.
But the tax system is entirely blind to your purchasing power. It only reads the nominal dollar amount on your group certificate. So that inflation matching raise pushes your total nominal income into a higher tax bracket.
Oh, wait, so suddenly you're paying a higher percentage of your income in tax even though your real-world wealth hasn't improved at all.
Yes.
It's like walking up a down escalator. You are putting in all this physical effort, your legs are burning, you are climbing as fast as you can, but the stairs are actively pulling you backward.
And you are completely exhausted just trying to stay in the exact same place on that escalator.
That is so frustrating.
And here's where it gets highly systemic. According to OECD data, Australia is one of only 4 OECD countries that does not automatically index its tax brackets to inflation.
What? Only 4?
Yeah. Most developed nations automatically adjust their tax thresholds upward every year to ensure inflation doesn't secretly tax their citizens like this.
And we should be clear here for the listener, looking at the historical data, this is not a partisan issue. The sources note that both left-wing and right-wing governments have utilized this mechanism for decades. Neither side is eager to fix it.
Oh, of course not.
Right.
Because bracket creep is the ultimate political free lunch.
Right.
It allows the government to harvest billions of dollars in extra tax revenue every single year without ever having to pass a new tax law or face the public backlash of announcing a tax hike.
Inflation just silently sweeps ordinary earners into higher brackets.
Exactly.
And then the absolute kicker is that right before an election cycle, whichever government happens to be in power will announce these massive, generous, quote-unquote, tax cuts.
Handing a tiny fraction of that money back to the public and parading around like heroes.
While fundamentally, the structural tax burden on the individual has permanently increased over time. So, if inflation is functioning as this stealth tax collector, who is this system actually designed to squeeze? Because if I am driving for a delivery app at 10 p.m. just to afford my kids' school uniforms, I really shouldn't be getting hit with tax rates originally designed for oil tycoons.
Well, historically, you wouldn't have been. The historical data Yardney provides reveals a staggering shift in who actually funds the country.
Okay, take us back.
When Australia introduced federal income tax back in 1915, the top marginal rate was 25%. But that top rate only applied to incomes equivalent to $960,000 in today's dollars.
Almost $1 million a year just to trigger the top tax rate?
Yes, that was roughly 48 times the average worker's wage in 1915. Income tax, especially at the higher tiers, was designed almost exclusively for the super rich.
Right.
It was never intended to touch the working middle class.
So $1 million triggered the top rate a century ago. Where does the top rate of 47% kick in today?
Today, the top tax bracket kicks in at just 2.3 times the average wage.
2.3 times.
Yeah.
That completely redefines the tax base. You aren't taxing the super rich anymore. You are taxing senior nurses, public school principals, tradespeople running small businesses.
Yep.
And a massive cohort of people working a full-time job plus a side hustle just to keep their heads above water.
The structural burden has been deliberately shifted away from wealth and directly onto the shoulders of wage earners.
Wow.
To put this in a global context, Australia now collects roughly 40% of its total tax revenue directly from personal income tax.
The 40%.
The OECD average is closer to 25%. The ordinary wage earner in Australia is carrying a disproportionately massive load compared to the rest of the developed world.
Which really brings us full circle to the core question of this deep dive. If you are getting squeezed by stagnant wages, inflation, and bracket creep, you literally have no levers left to pull. You can't just mandate a raise at your primary job. So you turn to the gig economy. It's the only pressure valve you have left.
And that profound economic desperation is the exact fuel source the gig platforms rely on to exist.
Oh, that's dark.
Economists like Mariana Mazzucato and Thomas Piketty have written extensively about this. They point out that this massive global shift toward the gig economy isn't necessarily creating new economic value or even incredible new services.
Right.
In many cases, it is simply enriching rent-seeking platforms.
Let's define rent-seeking for a second. We're talking about companies that don't necessarily create a product, but insert themselves in the middle of a transaction to extract a toll, right?
Exactly. Under the traditional employment model, a company has to pay fixed overhead costs to hire a human being. They pay for health insurance, sick leave, workers' compensation, office space, equipment.
All the standard benefits.
Right. And industry data shows those benefits add about 40% to the base salary cost of an employee.
So if you hire someone for $50,000, they actually cost the company $70,000.
Yeah, exactly. But by shifting the labor force onto a gig app, the platform completely evades that 40% overhead.
But they don't eliminate the costs, though. They just systematically push all of those expenses directly onto the worker.
Bingo. The worker provides the vehicle, the worker pays for the fuel, the worker covers their own insurance, their own sick leave, their own vehicle maintenance.
And the app just collects the fee.
Right. And the platform utilizes algorithmic management to ensure the worker is paid just enough to keep logging in, but never enough to actually get ahead of those hidden costs.
I saw the math on this in the Fair Work India report you pulled, and the numbers are honestly devastating. Explain how the app's algorithm practically hollows out the worker's earnings.
Okay, so the Fair Work researchers tracked a worker who earned 15,000 rupees gross in a specific period. On paper, the app tells the worker they made 15,000 rupees.
Okay, sounds good so far.
But once the researchers deducted the cost of fuel, which the worker obviously has to pay out of pocket at retail prices, plus the unavoidable vehicle maintenance, and the basic insurance required just to operate legally on the road,
What happens?
the worker's actual net take-home pay was only 7,000 rupees.
Over half of their gross income vanishes, just covering the basic mechanics of doing the job.
Yeah. And to earn that 7,000 net, they were working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, with absolutely zero safety net if they crash their bike or get sick.
So we really have to look at the reality of this landscape. We set out to answer a specific question today. Is the side hustle culture about empowering the individual to make more income? Or is it merely an ability for the government to collect more tax and platforms to extract more rent?
Right.
If you are a listener out there driving for Uber after your 9 to 5, why keep pushing for more income if bracket creep and algorithmic wage suppression mean you take all the risk just to stay in the exact same social class?
It is a profound paradox. And honestly, it validates Adorno's critique of the illusion of freedom perfectly.
It really does.
Because without incredibly sophisticated tax structuring, which the average person simply cannot afford, the individual is caught in a relentless pincer movement.
Yeah, you're squeezed from both sides.
Exactly. On one side, you have rent-seeking gig platforms artificially pushing overhead costs onto you. On the other side, You have a government that utilizes bracket creep to steadily increase your tax burden.
You sacrifice your evenings, you commodify your hobbies, but the primary financial beneficiaries are just the tech platforms and the federal treasury.
The system isn't broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to. It is harvesting that extra productivity.
Well, thank you so much for breaking down the mechanics of this with me today.
My pleasure.
We've untangled a massive web here. We looked at how instrumental rationality tricks us into romanticizing our own exhaustion. We cleared up the myth that progressive tax brackets actively punish you for getting a promotion.
A very important myth to bust.
Absolutely. But we also exposed the much harsher reality of bracket creep and a tax system that has slowly, silently migrated its immense weight away from the super rich and directly onto the backs of people working a day job and a side hustle.
It's sobering reality for sure.
Hmm.
And before we close out, I want to leave everyone with a broader philosophical question to chew on, something that extends beyond just the math of tax brackets.
Oh, okay. What have you got?
If our modern economic structure necessitates constant, relentless hustling just to offset inflation and silent tax burdens, what happens to human culture?
Wow.
What happens to art, to innovation, to our mental health, when every hobby, every passion, and every spare moment must be monetized just to keep up?
Yeah.
In the near future, will the ultimate unattainable luxury simply be the financial ability to do absolutely nothing?
The luxury of doing nothing. That is a really heavy thought to end on. If you're listening right now, take a hard look at your own paychecks, review how your side hustles are structured, and ask yourself who is really profiting from your golden hamster wheel. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.